The Nevada sun beat down mercilessly on Nellis Air Force Base as Jasmine Brooks walked the 100 yards to the command building. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from fear, but from the weight of maintaining her composure. 5 years of pretending to be less than she was. 5 years of swallowing insults and manufactured failures. Jasmine's fingers brushed her father's old Omega watch, feeling the subtle vibration that confirmed it was still recording. The timepiece had been her anchor through this mission, a connection to the father she'd lost 30 years ago, and a tool for gathering evidence that would eventually bring down the corruption she'd been sent to investigate. As the only black woman in her cadet class, Jasmine had faced barriers at every turn. Her test scores mysteriously dropped. Training exercises suddenly became too difficult for her to complete. Fellow cadets were encouraged to isolate her. But Jasmine knew the truth. Her actual performance metrics put her in the top 5% across the board. Captain Nathan Cross waited in the briefing room, his 6'2" frame positioned perfectly in the shaft of light from the window. With his square jaw, piercing blue eyes, and sun-kissed hair that somehow stayed perfect despite the desert wind, he looked like Hollywood's idea of the all-American hero. But Jasmine had learned long ago that monsters often wore the prettiest masks. "Cadet Brooks," he said, his voice carrying that particular brand of condescension reserved for those deemed unworthy. "I'm afraid your psychological evaluation scores have failed to meet minimum standards." He slid a tablet across the table, the screen showing impossibly low numbers. 2.1 out of 10 for reflexes, 1.8 for decision-making. These are the lowest scores we've recorded in the program's history, Cross continued, a slight smirk revealing his pleasure in the moment. "Perhaps you should consider returning to Memphis. I'm sure there are opportunities there more suited to your capabilities." The pause before opportunities was deliberate, loaded with implications about what a black single mother could and couldn't achieve. The other instructors shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke up. They never did. Lieutenant Porter cleared her throat as if to speak, her hand half raised. For a moment, Jasmine felt a spark of hope. Finally, someone would stand up to this charade. But Cross turned his icy gaze on the female instructor, and Porter's courage evaporated. Her hand dropped, her eyes found the floor, and another ally chose silence over justice. "You have 24 hours to clear out your quarters," Cross continued, his tone shifting to mock sympathy. "I know this must be difficult, especially with your daughter's condition." He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice so only Jasmine could hear. "Such a shame about little Sophia. Heart conditions in children can be so unpredictable." "She'll be dead before you can even file an appeal." The words hit like physical blows, but Jasmine's expression never changed. Inside, her mind raced. How did he know about Sophia's heart condition? The medical records were sealed, protected by HIPAA laws. Someone very high up had given him access. Someone who knew exactly who Jasmine really was and what she was investigating. Jasmine drove through the Memphis darkness toward the children's hospital, her mind cataloguing every vehicle that followed for more than 2 turns. The FBI training never left you, even when your world was crumbling. Especially then. The security camera in Sophia's room had been her breaking point, not just its existence, but its angle, positioned to capture both the bed and the window. Professional, deliberate. A threat disguised as surveillance. She disabled it remotely using her watch's capabilities, but the message had been received. They could reach her daughter any time they wanted. Sophia slept peacefully, unaware that her 6-year-old body had become a battlefield in a war she'd never understand. Jasmine sat beside the bed, gently stroking her daughter's hand, careful not to disturb the IV lines. The steady beep of monitors provided the only soundtrack to her thoughts. "Ms. Brooks?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "There's someone asking to speak with you. Says it's about your status at Nellis." Jasmine tensed, but nodded. In the waiting area stood Master Sergeant Diego Morales, the 75-year-old maintenance chief who rarely involved himself in cadet affairs. His weathered face revealed nothing, but his eyes held a strange intensity. "Cadet Brooks," he said formally, "I heard about your dismissal." "Not much I can do about it," Jasmine replied carefully. "Perhaps." Morales glanced around before lowering his voice. "But it seems strange, doesn't it? Your records show exceptional aptitude before they were altered." Jasmine's pulse quickened. "Altered? That's a serious accusation, Sergeant." "Not an accusation, a fact." He handed her a USB drive. "The originals, before Cross got to them, might help with an appeal." As Jasmine reached for it, Morales leaned closer. "Your father would be proud of you. Not many would stand up to them like you have." The mention of her father, a man who died when she was an infant, made Jasmine's breath catch. Before she could respond, Morales was walking away, leaving her with more questions than answers. The next morning, Jasmine found Captain Cross waiting outside her quarters as she packed her belongings. "Just making sure you understand the timeline, Brooks," he said, leaning against the doorframe. 24 hours means you're gone by 0900 tomorrow." "I understand perfectly, Captain," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice neutral despite the rage building inside her. "Good." He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Because there's something else you should understand. If you think filing complaints or showing that USB drive to anyone will help you, think again. We know who you really are, Agent Brooks." The words froze her in place. Her cover was blown. "That's right," Cross continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We know the FBI sent you to investigate procurement irregularities, but you found nothing because there's nothing to find. What you don't realize is that you're playing in a game much bigger than you understand." He reached past her to pick up a framed photo of Sophia. "Cute kid. Be a shame if her condition suddenly worsened while you were busy tilting at windmills." Jasmine snatched the photo from his hands, her composure finally cracking. "Touch my daughter's picture again. An FBI agent or not, I will break your arm." Cross laughed, stepping back with his hands raised in mock surrender. "There she is, the real Jasmine Brooks. Not so professional now, are we?" His smile vanished. "Take the loss, Brooks. Go back to Memphis. Forget what you've seen here. Or next time, it won't be just a picture I'm touching." The Lucky Strike Bar sat 3 blocks from base, the kind of dive where pilots went to forget their close calls and maintenance crews drowned their frustrations. Jasmine hadn't planned to go there after leaving the hospital, but she needed to think, and sometimes the best place to be invisible was in a crowd. She recognized the back of Nathan Cross's head immediately. That perfect golden hair was unmistakable, even in the dim light. He sat alone at the bar, unusual for the base's golden boy. As she watched, he knocked back his 3rd whiskey in 10 minutes. Something was eating at him. Against her better judgment, Jasmine approached. Sometimes the best intelligence came from enemies who didn't know they were being surveilled. She slid onto the bar stool beside him, ordering a beer she had no intention of drinking. "Drowning your sorrows, Captain? Thought you'd be celebrating. Finally got rid of the unqualified cadet." Cross turned, and for a moment his mask slipped. She saw exhaustion, guilt, and something else, fear. But then the familiar sneer returned. "Brooks, shouldn't you be packing?" He lifted his glass in a mock toast, but his hand wasn't quite steady. The whiskey sloshed, spilling across the bar and onto Jasmine's sleeve.
"Shit!" he muttered, grabbing napkins. As he leaned close to dab at the spill, his entire demeanor changed. His voice dropped to barely a whisper, lips hardly moving. "July the 16th, 1994, Memphis. Your grandfather's crash. It wasn't an accident." Jasmine's
breath caught, but she forced herself to remain still. Cross continued, pretending to clean the spill while speaking rapidly. "Cain killed him just like he killed my mother." The words hit like physical blows. Jasmine's mind raced, trying to process this impossible revelation. Cross, the privileged senator's son who'd made her life hell, claiming to be a victim of the same conspiracy. He pressed a folded napkin into her hand, then pulled back, raising his voice to normal volume. "There, good as new, though I doubt they have dry cleaning in Memphis." His sneer was back, but now she could see the performance in it. The bar had filled with new customers in the last 2 minutes, 12 men, all moving with the controlled awareness of professional soldiers. They spread throughout the room with practiced casualness, but their positioning was tactical. Exits covered, sightlines clear. Cross had seen them too. His body language shifted subtly, angling to shield Jasmine from the nearest threat. "Play along," he breathed, then louder. "You know what your problem is, Brooks? You never learned your
place, coming here thinking you could fly with real pilots."
He stood, swaying slightly, selling the drunk act. As he did, he pulled Jasmine to her feet, spinning her toward the wall. To observers, it would look like intimidation. In reality, he was blocking 3 separate lines of fire. "My mother was
Natasha Vulov," he whispered urgently against her ear. "Russian FSB, but she'd turned, feeding intel to the CIA about arms deals. Cain was her handler. When she found out about the Babylon ring, he had her killed. Made it look like Dad did it. I was 12.
His arms came around her in what appeared to be a threatening embrace, but was actually protective. Jasmine could feel tension thrumming through his body, ready to move at the first sign of violence. "Why should I believe you?" she whispered back.
Even as her instincts screamed that he was telling the truth, the pain in his voice was too raw to be fake. "Because in 30 seconds, those men are going to try to kill us both," Cross replied.
"Cain knows I've been investigating him, knows I made contact with you. We're both loose ends now." He slipped something into her pocket. "A flash drive, everything I've collected in 5 years. Guard it with your life." The first man moved, reaching
inside his jacket. Cross reacted instantly, shoving Jasmine toward the back exit while throwing his whiskey glass at the overhead light.
The bar plunged into semi-darkness just as silenced weapons cleared holsters. Jasmine burst into the alley, combat training taking over. 2 men waited by a van, weapons already drawn. Before they could react, a figure dropped from the fire escape. Above, Morales, moving with impossible agility for his age. His strikes were precise, economical, dropping both men in seconds. "Move!" he barked, but Jasmine hesitated. Cross was still inside. Gunfire erupted, no longer silenced. Through the doorway, she saw him fighting 3 men at once, using bar stools and bottles as weapons. Blood ran from a gash on his forehead, but he kept moving, kept fighting, buying her time to escape. "We can't leave him," she said, starting back toward the door. Morales caught her arm with surprising strength. "He knows the risks. Our priority is keeping you alive. You're the only one who can stop this." More men rounded the corner, weapons raised. Morales produced a pistol from nowhere, laying down covering fire as they retreated. Jasmine's mind catalogued details even as they ran. License plates, faces, tactical formations. The FBI would need everything she could remember if she lived. long enough to report it. They reached Morales' truck just as Cross burst from the bar, his shirt torn and bloody but still moving. He'd fought his way through 6 professional killers and somehow survived. "Get in!" Morales shouted, already gunning the engine. Cross dove into the truck bed as bullets sparked off the tailgate. They roared into the night, tires smoking, leaving chaos behind. "How?" Jasmine gasped, looking at Morales. "How does a 75-year-old maintenance chief fight like that?" Morales glanced at her in the rearview mirror, and for the first time she saw something familiar in those weathered features, something in the shape of his jaw, the set of his eyes. "Because I'm not really 75, he said quietly. "And my name isn't Diego Morales." Her phone buzzed, a message that made her blood freeze. Security footage attached. Sophia's empty hospital bed, a note on her pillow. 100 hours tomorrow. Come alone or she dies. The abandoned hangar sat on the outskirts of Nellis, a relic from the Cold War when B-52 bombers needed shelter from nuclear nightmares. Now it served as Morales' sanctuary, hidden behind false walls and forgotten in bureaucratics'
filing systems. He led Jasmine and Cross through a maze of security measures, biometric scanners disguised as rust patches, pressure plates that looked like cracked concrete.
Finally, they reached an inner chamber that took Jasmine's breath away. The walls were covered with 30 years of investigation, photographs, documents, flight plans, financial records, weapons manifests, all connected by red string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except this conspiracy was real. "My God," Cross breathed, his injuries forgotten as he stared at the evidence. This goes back to the 80s. Morales moved to an industrial sink, pulling off what Jasmine now realized were prosthetic additions to his face. Layer by layer, he removed 3 decades of disguise. The nose straightened, the jowls disappeared. The age lines revealed themselves as masterful makeup. When he finally turned back to them, Jasmine's knees nearly buckled. The face was older, scarred by time and surgery, but unmistakable. She was looking at her grandfather. "Hello, Sparrow," Robert Brooks said softly, using her childhood nickname. "I'm sorry for the deception, but staying dead was the only way to keep you and your mother safe." 30 years, Jasmine whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You let us mourn you. For 30 years, Mum died thinking you were gone. I grew up without—" Her voice broke completely. The little girl who'd studied her father's codes and signals, who'd learned Morse code from his old training manuals, who'd become an FBI agent, partly to honor his memory, that little girl was suddenly, devastatingly present. Cross stood frozen, blood still dripping from his forehead, watching this impossible reunion. His own family tragedy paled beside the magnitude of this deception. Yet he understood the brutal mathematics of survival in Kane's world. Sometimes love meant letting people think you were dead. "Every letter I tried to send was intercepted," Robert continued, his voice heavy with decades of regret. "Every attempt to contact you led to threats against your lives. Kane had watchers everywhere. The only way to protect you was to become someone else entirely, to wait, to prepare." He gestured to the walls of evidence. Victor Kane didn't just kill pilots who discovered his arms dealing. He built an empire on their graves. The Babylon Ring controls 40% of black market weapons sales globally. F-16s to Pakistan, radar systems to China, and now F-22s to Iran. Each sale weakens America and enriches monsters. He pulled out a classified folder marked with symbols Jasmine recognized from her FBI briefings. But selling weapons is just part of it. Kane has been placing his people, Throughout the military command structure for 3 decades, generals, admirals, Pentagon officials, a shadow government within our government. "The Kingmaker," Cross said suddenly. "You're the Kingmaker, the legendary intelligence operative."
Who disappeared in '94, Robert nodded grimly.
A name I never wanted. But yes, I spent years building networks, turning assets, gathering intelligence, all preparing for the day I could bring Kane down. He looked at Jasmine with eyes full of pain. That day has finally come. But I never
Intended for you to be involved. You knew I was here for 5 years, Jasmine said, her voice hardening. Knew I was in danger, and you said nothing, because revealing myself would have signed your death warrant. Robert's composure finally cracked.
Kane has your psychological profiles, your mission parameters, everything. The moment he knew I was alive, he would have killed you and Sophia without hesitation. The only protection was my death. He pulled up surveillance footage on one of his monitors. But something changed 6 months ago. Kane started making mistakes, getting sloppy. Age, arrogance, or maybe just greed. He accelerated the F-22 sales, pushed too hard. That's when I knew we had a window, a chance to end this. Jasmine's phone buzzed with another message, this time with video. Sophia lay on what looked like an operating table, still unconscious, but surrounded by medical equipment. A timer in the corner counted down from 18 hours. "Demonstration tomorrow," the text read. "You fly, you die, she lives. You refuse, she dies, you live." "Jesus Christ," Cross muttered, his face pale beneath the blood. "He's really going to do it. Use a 6-year-old as leverage for mass murder." Robert studied the video with professional detachment, but Jasmine saw his hands tremble. "The demonstration tell me about it." Cross pulled up files on his phone, wincing as movement aggravated his injuries. "Annual display for Pentagon brass and foreign military attachés. Officially, it's to show off pilot training. Unofficially, it's where deals get made. Kane arranged for 6 F-22s to perform. I was supposed to lead the formation, but..." He glanced at Jasmine. "After today's bar fight, I'm probably off the roster. They'll need a replacement pilot." "Me?" Jasmine said flatly. "They want me to fly an F-22 in front of military officials from around the world. And then what? Crash it? Defect with it?" Robert was already pulling up technical specifications. "No, they want you to fly it perfectly, to prove that even an unqualified pilot can handle America's best fighter. It's a sales pitch. Look how easy our tech is to steal, to copy, to defeat. The buyers will be watching through encrypted feeds. The moment you land safely, 6 Raptors worth of technology transfers to enemy hands." The cruel elegance of the plan was breathtaking. Use a grieving mother's love to betray her country. Create a narrative where a dismissed black female cadet steals military secrets for revenge. Kane would get his money, America would be humiliated, and Jasmine would take the fall for treason. "There has to be another way," Cross said, but he sounded doubtful. 18 hours to save a child and stop an arms deal that could shift global power. "There is," Robert said quietly, "but it requires us to trust each other completely, and it means revealing everything to enemies who've been watching for 30 years. He looked at his granddaughter, seeing her mother's determination and his own stubborn refusal to surrender. "Jasmine, what I'm about to propose will put you at the center of a firestorm. The FBI, the military, Kane's organization, they'll all come for you. Are you prepared for that?" Jasmine thought of Sophia's laugh, her tiny hands, the way she still believed her mother could fix anything. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to save my daughter and stop these bastards, even if it means flying into hell itself." Robert smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face. "That's my granddaughter. All right then,
Let me tell you about the second F-22, the one Kane doesn't know exists. The video call came at exactly 0900 hours, Kane's face filling the screen with grandfatherly concern that made Jasmine's skin crawl. Behind him, Sophia lay on what was clearly a medical transport gurney, IV lines feeding into her small arms. She looked so fragile, so vulnerable. "Miss Brooks," Kane said, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command. Or should I say, Agent Brooks, let's dispense with pretense. You know who I am, I know who you are, and we both know what needs to happen today. He adjusted the camera angle to show more of the room. Medical equipment lined the walls, all of surgical quality. A heart-lung machine stood ready. Doctors in scrubs moved in the background, preparing for a procedure that would either save or end Sophia's life. "The terms are simple," Kane continued. "At 1400 hours, you will pilot an F-22 Raptor. In the scheduled demonstration, you will perform flawlessly, proving that American technology can be mastered by anyone with basic training. Our international guests will be most impressed. After landing, you will walk away and speak of this to no one. In return, your daughter receives the heart transplant she needs from a donor who tragically passed away this morning. Refuse, and there will be no operation, no miracle, no future for little Sophia." Jasmine's hands clenched into fists, nails biting into her palms. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Kane smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Because I'm a grandfather too, Miss Brooks. My grandson Nathan sits beside you even now." "Oh yes, I know about your unlikely alliance." "Did he tell you he's my son?" The revelation hit like a physical blow. Cross Kane's son?
She turned to stare at him, seeing his face drain of color. "No," he whispered. "That's not—" "Mother told me my father was Senator Charles Cross." "A useful fiction," Kane interrupted. "Your mother was indeed Natasha Vulov, but she was never married."
"To that pompous fool. She was mine, my asset, my lover, my betrayer. When she tried to expose the Babylon ring, I had no choice. But I let you live, Nathan. Raised you from afar. Guided your career."
"You're my blood, whether you like it or not." Cross lurched to his feet, rage and revulsion warring on his face. "You murdered her. She loved you, and you had her killed." Kane's expression hardened. "She chose her precious ethics over her family, just as you're doing now. But there's still time, son. Join me. Help me complete this transaction, and I'll forgive your recent indiscretions. We can rule this empire together." "I'd rather die," Cross snarled, but Jasmine heard the pain beneath the anger. Another child destroyed by the sins of their parents. Another life twisted by Kane's web of manipulation. "One more thing," Kane added, his attention returning to Jasmine. "Your grandfather. I know he's alive. I've always known. Did you really think I'd let the great kingmaker disappear without keeping tabs? He's been my unwitting asset for 30 years, gathering evidence I've allowed him to find, building a case that will never see court, because who would believe a ghost? A man who abandoned his family, faked his death, lived a lie?" The screen shifted to show satellite imagery of their current location. "I know exactly where you are. My men surround that hangar, but I'm not unreasonable. Fly the plane, save your daughter, and I'll let you all walk away. This conflict between us ends, today one way or another." The call ended, leaving them in silence broken only by the hum of electronics. Sophia's face lingered on the blank screen like an afterimage, a reminder of what hung in the balance. "It's true, isn't it?" Cross asked Robert, his voice hollow. "You knew he was watching. You let him think he was in control." Robert nodded slowly. "The best trap is one the prey doesn't know exists." "Yes, I knew Victor was monitoring me." feeding him false intelligence mixed with just enough truth to keep him confident, building toward this moment when he would overreach. "But Sophia," Jasmine began. "Is safe," Robert interrupted. "Or she will be, because Kane made one crucial error. He assumed the second F-22 was destroyed in a training accident 3 years ago. The pilot died, the aircraft was written off, the wreckage supposedly scattered across the Mojave. But that pilot was my asset. The crash was staged, and that Raptor has been hidden, maintained, and upgraded ever since, waiting for the day we would need an ace in the hole." He pulled up technical schematics that made Jasmine's pulse race. 2 F-22s, one pilot publicly flying Kane's mission, one ghost aircraft appearing at exactly the right moment to change everything. "I won't let Sophia
"Be leverage," Jasmine said, her voice steel.
"But I won't betray my country either. So we do this my way. I fly for my daughter's life, but I fly to end this forever." She looked at Cross, seeing her own determination mirrored in his eyes. They were both children of monsters, both trying to break free from inherited sins. "Together?" he asked quietly. "Together," she confirmed, because sometimes the only way to defeat a legacy of betrayal was to trust someone who understood the cost. The F-22 Raptor responded to Jasmine's touch like a living thing, $200 million of American engineering prowess wrapped around one determined mother's fury. She'd spent the morning in Robert's simulator, learning the aircraft's quirks and capabilities, while Cross programmed their coordinated attack plan. Now, at 1350 hours, she sat in the actual cockpit, feeling the twin Pratt and Whitney,
engines thrumming with barely contained power.
Through her helmet's display, she could see the crowd gathering below, Pentagon officials, foreign military attachés, and somewhere among them, the buyers for Kane's treason. Her grandfather's voice crackled through the secure comm channel he'd piggybacked onto the military frequencies. "Remember the Memphis slide, Sparrow? I taught it to you when you were 12, flying that old Cessna over the cotton fields. Same principle, just 500 mph faster." The control tower cleared her for takeoff, confusion evident in their voices, the dismissed cadets somehow back in their airspace, somehow in their most advanced fighter. But Kane had smoothed the way, his authority overriding standard protocols. He wanted this show to go perfectly. He was about to get more performance than he'd bargained for. Jasmine advanced the throttles, feeling the acceleration press her back into the ejection seat. The Raptor leaped skyward, climbing at an angle that would have torn lesser aircraft apart. Below, she could hear the crowd's collective gasp over the open frequencies. They'd expected a basic demonstration from a failed cadet. Instead, they were witnessing mastery that few pilots ever achieve. For 10 minutes, she flew Kane's program flawlessly. Barrel rolls, Immelman turns, high G maneuvers that pushed human endurance to its limits. All the while, she remembered, Sophia's face, her daughter's trust that Mommy would make everything better. Each perfect execution was a promise. "I'm coming, baby. Mommy's coming." Then Cross's voice cut through the performance chatter. "Hostile radar lock. 4 F-16s vectoring your position." Kane's insurance policy. She'd expected this. Kane wouldn't trust her completely, wouldn't risk his prize asset escaping. The F-16s formed up around her, their pilots faceless, behind tinted visors, but their intent clear. Any deviation from the plan would mean a missile in her tailpipe. "Phase 2, Robert announced. "Nathan, you are cleared hot from the east." Another Raptor appeared on Jasmine's radar, the ghost aircraft, painted matte black, no identification numbers, officially dead for 3 years. Cross had spent the last hours familiarizing himself with its upgraded systems, and now he proved why he'd earned his wings despite his father's interference. He came in low and fast, using terrain masking techniques that shouldn't have been possible in the Nevada desert. The F-16 pilots reacted with trained precision, 2 peeling off to intercept while 2 stayed with Jasmine. But Cross had learned from the best. His mother, the Russian ace who dominated Cold War skies before love and conscience turned her westward. He rolled inverted between the interceptors, the Memphis slide executed at speeds that turned physics into poetry. Warning shots fired, someone reported, but Cross was already gone, dancing through the sky like his aircraft weighed nothing. The crowd below had noticed the intruder, fingers pointing, voices rising in alarm. This wasn't part of the scheduled demonstration. Kane's voice erupted across the emergency frequency. All units, splash the black aircraft. Repeat, splash the hostile. But confusion reigned. Was this part of the show, a surprise demonstration? The foreign observers were riveted, watching American pilots engage each other with technology they'd only dreamed of possessing. Meanwhile, Jasmine continued her routine, pretending ignorance of the chaos above, buying time for the next phase. General. Victor Kane emerged from the VIP viewing area, commandeering an F-35 Lightning that had been on static display. At 62, he shouldn't have been able to fly combat missions, but rage and desperation gave him strength. His son, his blood, had betrayed him. The child he'd protected even after killing the mother who birthed him. It was intolerable, unforgivable. "You think you know the sky, boy?" Kane snarled across the comm channels. "I was flying before you were born. I've killed better pilots than you'll ever be." The F-35 roared to life, its single engine screaming as Kane pushed it toward the fight. Cross broke right, narrowly avoiding
a missile from one of the F-16s. "Jasmine, we need Phase 3 now." But she was already moving, her Raptor suddenly breaking from its demonstration pattern. The Memphis slide, but modified, improved, made deadly by 30 years of evolution.
She inverted at 500 feet, a move that should have killed her, pulling negative Gs that turned her vision red. The crowd screamed, certain they were about to witness a crash. Instead, Jasmine's Raptor leveled out at 50 feet, screaming across. The runway so low that jet wash knocked dignitaries to their knees. As she passed the main reviewing stand, her weapons bay opened briefly, not to fire, but to deploy electronic warfare pods that Robert had installed. Every screen in a half-mile radius erupted with images, classified documents, bank transfers, photos of Kane meeting with Iranian agents, Chinese military officials, anyone willing to pay for American secrets. 30 years of evidence displayed, in seconds impossible to deny or suppress. Kane's scream echoed across the frequencies as he realized what was happening, his carefully constructed empire exposed to the very people he'd been selling to. The foreign attachés weren't seeing a sales pitch anymore. They were witnessing the unraveling of the greatest intelligence disaster in American history. He turned his F-35 toward Jasmine, murder in his heart, but Cross was there, his ghost Raptor positioned between them. "Hello, Dad," he said quietly. "Time to end this." Father and son circled each other at 30,000 feet. Below, sirens wailed as FBI agents flooded the base. Robert's final gift, coordinates and evidence delivered to authorities who weren't on Kane's payroll.
"You're my blood," Kane roared, lining up a missile shot. "Everything I did was for us, for our legacy." Cross's voice was steady, sad. "Your legacy dies today, and I'll live with being your son, but I won't live as your weapon." He performed a maneuver Jasmine had never seen, something beyond training or technology, pure instinct, pure defiance. The two aircraft merged on radar for a heartbeat, then separated. Kane's F-35 shuddered, damage alarms screaming. His son had used the Raptor's thrust vectoring
to force a controlled collision, sacrificing his own aircraft to cripple his father's. Both planes began falling, pilots ejecting in sequence, Cross and Kane floating down under parachutes. Still, father and son, even as everything else fell apart, but the drama wasn't over. A low rumble filled the sky, a sound from another era. From the north, a B-2 Spirit materialized like death itself, the strategic bomber invisible to radar, carrying enough ordnance to level the base if necessary. Robert's voice filled the airwaves, calm and final. Victor Kane, Marcus Stone, whatever name you use. This is Robert Brooks, the ghost you created, the man you murdered who wouldn't stay dead. 30 years ago, you took everything from me. Today, I return the favor. The bomber's bay doors opened, but instead of bombs, cameras emerged, high-def, satellite-linked, broadcasting everything to news networks worldwide, the ultimate exposure for a man who'd lived in shadows. Your buyers are watching, Victor. Your
allies, your victims, everyone. They see you falling from the sky, defeated by the children you tried to corrupt. How does it feel to lose everything? The arrest of General Victor Kane made headlines across the world, but Jasmine barely noticed.
She stood in the pediatric ICU, watching Sophia breathe steadily for the first time in months. The heart transplant had proceeded flawlessly. The donor had been real, though Kane's timing had been manipulation. Her daughter would live, would grow, would have the chance Jasmine had almost lost fighting shadows and secrets. Nathan Cross sat in federal custody, technically under arrest, but actually in protective custody. His testimony was unraveling decades of corruption, naming names that reached into Congress, the Pentagon, and boardrooms across America. He faced charges for his role in Jasmine's harassment, but his cooperation and the evidence he'd gathered would likely mean probation rather than prison. More importantly, he was finally free from his father's shadow. FBI Director Patricia Hawthorne stood at the window beside Jasmine, her usually stern face softened by something like admiration. 5 years undercover, and we never knew the real scope of what you'd stumbled into. The Babylon Ring, Kane's network, your grandfather's operation. It's the intelligence coup of the century. She paused, studying Jasmine's exhausted but determined face. There will be a medal ceremony, public recognition. You've earned it. Jasmine shook her head. No ceremonies, no publicity. I've lived enough lies. I just want to fly and raise my daughter. She touched the window, leaving fingerprints on the glass. Besides, the real hero is sleeping in that bed. She survived what would have broken adults. That's the only recognition I need. Lieutenant Rachel Porter appeared in the doorway, hesitant but determined. The instructor who'd stayed silent carried a burden of guilt that showed in every line of her face. Agent Brooks, Jasmine, I need to apologize, she began. I stood there while they humiliated you. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid. Afraid.
Of losing my position, my career. I chose comfort over conscience. And I'm sorry. Jasmine studied her for a long moment, remembering her grandfather's words about dangerous choices.
Your silence was a choice, Lieutenant, but so is your presence here today. What matters is what you do next. Porter straightened, military bearing returning. I've submitted my resignation from the Air Force, but first, I'm testifying before the Inspector General about every incident of discrimination I've witnessed or participated in. The culture has to change. 6 months later, Nellis Air Force Base had transformed. Jasmine stood before a new class of cadets as Director of Training, a position created specifically to address the systemic failures Kane had exploited. 45% of the incoming class were women or minorities, selected through a transparent process that valued talent over connections. The old boy network was dead, replaced by something that looked more like America itself. Nathan Cross, instructed beside her, wearing an ankle monitor, but teaching with passion about ethical flying and moral courage. His students didn't know his full story. That would come later in history books and cautionary tales. But they recognized someone who'd faced darkness and chosen light. Robert Brooks had officially returned from the dead. At 78, his story captivated a nation hungry for heroes who played the long game. He spent his days teaching advanced tactics to select pilots, sharing decades of knowledge that had been hidden in shadows. But his greatest joy came in the evenings, when Sophia would climb into his lap and beg for stories about the old days, about her brave mother and the grandfather who'd watched over them from afar. One perfect Nevada morning, Jasmine led a formation of F-22s across the desert sky. Below, families gathered for the base's first public air show since the scandal. She could see Sophia in the crowd, now 7 years old and healthy, wearing her own junior pilot wings. The girl who'd nearly died, as leverage in a monster's game, now dreamed of following her mother's contrails. "Demo flight! This is Tower," the radio crackled. "You are cleared for unrestricted performance. Show them what you got." Jasmine smiled, remembering another voice, another time, her grandfather teaching her to fly over Memphis cotton fields, telling her the sky had no limits except those people imposed. She'd learned the hard way how true that was, limits of prejudice, corruption, inherited sin. But she'd also learned that limits could be shattered by those brave enough to push past them. She rolled inverted at 15,000 feet. The Memphis slide evolved into something entirely her own. Her wingmen followed, trusting her completely. 2 women, 1 Latino man, all pilots who would have been rejected under the old system. They painted the sky with precision and power, showing watchers below what America could be when it lived up to its promises. In the VIP section, Director Hawthorne watched with satisfaction. The Babylon Ring investigation had led to 200 arrests across 17 countries. Weapons trafficking networks that had operated for decades were destroyed. Most importantly, the culture of silence that had enabled such corruption was breaking down. Whistleblowers came forward, protected by new laws and leaders who understood that integrity mattered more than connection. As the demonstration ended, Jasmine brought her Raptor down in a perfect landing. She could see Sophia running toward the flight line, Robert keeping pace despite his age. Nathan waited by the hangar, free from his monitor now, rebuilding a life untainted by his father's legacy. They were an unlikely family, forged by conspiracy, and bonded by survival. But they were proof that blood didn't define destiny, that choices mattered more than inheritance. "Mom," Sophia called out as Jasmine climbed down from the cockpit. "That was amazing. When can I start learning?" Jasmine pulled her daughter close, remembering another child who dreamed of flying, who'd lost her father to secrets and lies. "Whenever you're ready, baby. The sky is waiting for you." She looked up at the endless Nevada blue, where contrails traced promises across heaven. Somewhere up there, the ghosts of the past had finally found peace. And down here, the living were building something better, a world where silence wasn't safety, where courage counted more than connections, where a woman could bring down an empire and still land on her feet. The sky had no limits anymore, not for her, not for Sophia, not for anyone willing to reach for it. And that, more than any medal or recognition, was victory enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.